Welcome to episode 239 of the Ski Podcast, and thanks for joining us, listener. Today, we are going to be discussing the mountains of Catalonia, the ski resort Borovets in Bulgaria, and I am just back from a ski touring trip to Mt Etna, a live volcano in Sicily, so you can find out what that incredible experience was like. Now, as well as that, we also have our regular snow reports, more news from the European Youth Olympics, and we'll be revealing the winner of our Vallon goggles competition. My name's Iain Martin. I'd like to introduce my guests today, both of whom have been on the show before. Firstly, I'm delighted to welcome back freelance journalist Becs Miles. Becs was last on the show in episode 209 when she was telling us about Trysil in Norway. Hi, Becs. How are you?
Hi, Iain. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Whereabouts are you today, Becs?
Oh, I'm currently just in East London. No, nothing too exotic.
Just in East London. Okay, well, we'll move on to where you've been more recently a little bit later on. My second guest today is a regular on the show. I took a look back and I worked out this might be his 10th appearance on the show. He was last on as a guest in episode 226 when he shared his knowledge of skiing in Hokkaido in Japan. But Mike is an extremely well-travelled skier. We've also previously spoken about skiing in Bosnia, Madesimo, Turkey, North Macedonia, Georgia, Montenegro, and of course, he is also our resident expert on skiing in Wales. So if that doesn't give you an idea of how widely travelled he is, nothing will. Hi, Mike, how are you?
Yes, good morning, or as they say in these parts, günaydın, because I'm in Erciyes in Turkey still.
Well, I would expect nothing less, Mike, that you're overseas. I think you were in Turkey not so long ago because you did send us in a snow report recently. How long have you been out there on this trip?
This is my third week now. I was lucky to be in Uludağ and Catalonia and Borovets resorts near Istanbul, and now I'm back in central Turkey in Erciyes resort.
Fantastic. Well, a question I do always like to ask my guests to start off with is, when did you last ski or snowboard? And let's start with you, Becs. When were you last on snow?
So I was last on snow a couple of weeks ago in Catalonia. So we'll talk about that more in depth shortly. But it was the first time there for me. Actually, first time skiing in Spain, full stop. So it was really, really, really lovely. It's always good to ski in a new country, isn't it?
Mike, you're in Turkey in a ski resort at the moment. I presume you were out skiing yesterday, were you?
I was out skiing this morning because we're 3 hours ahead of you. So I've just rushed back in my ski gear, fixed my boots off, come back to the hotel room, and then I'm live on air. So about 25 minutes ago.
Right, I should have worked that out. That's brilliant. And what was the snow like this morning, Mike?
It was fantastic. We've had snow last week, and then we've had sunny skies since. Bit of a heavy wind, so some of the lifts have been down. But the whole area was open this morning, so we went coast to coast early before the Turks got up, because they're late risers like the South Americans. So we had the resort to ourselves, which was fantastic.
Right, cool. Okay, well, we have got some snow reports sent in from some of our regular contributors and guests. Actually got Katja Gaskell, who I think Becs knows pretty well, another freelance journalist. She's sent in a report from Japan. Alex Armand from Tip Top Ski Coaching in Les Deux Alpes, and Jen Sang from That's La Plan in La Plan.
Hi, this is Katja, and I am in Hokkaido in northern Japan. Hokkaido has had the most incredible season with just an insane amount of snow. Some resorts have had 6 meters, which is just extraordinary. We started in Tomamu in central Hokkaido, we had a base of just over 2 meters, so not quite as much as some other resorts, but it was snowing when we arrived. Beautiful powder on day one. I mean, that proper legendary Japanese powder. It warmed up a bit, so we didn't have any more snow while we were there, but it was snowing as we left, and temperatures were dropping. So that was a great place to start. We then headed to western Hokkaido, basing ourselves out of the port city of Otaru, which is a wonderful destination in itself. And it snowed as we arrived and just didn't stop snowing. I mean, there was so much snow that the resort we wanted to go to on our first day, Kiroro, was shut because there was just too much. So we found one resort that was open, one out of the 6 that are nearby, Asari, which was fabulous. A very small resort, just 4 chairlifts, and I mean, it was fantastic. Great knee-high powder in places, skiing through the trees, hardly anybody on the slopes, lifts that were a real throwback to another era, and really just a glorious day of skiing. We managed to get to Kiroro the second day. Not all of the resort was open. The summits had some sort of 46 centimeters of snow, so they hadn't opened all of it when we were there, but it was blue sky when we started, and it was snowing again when we left. So yeah, it's been a fantastic season in Hokkaido, and there's still lots of time to experience that wonderful Japanese powder.
Hi, this is Alex from Tip Top Ski Coaching with a snow report from Les Deux Alpes. Well, what a lovely surprise. Yesterday it snowed all day and snowed all night. So this morning we had blue skies, sunshine and fresh snow. Fantastic. It has been warmer down in the village, but very cold with an icy northerly wind up higher. The snow conditions are absolutely brilliant, both on and off the piste, above about 2,000 metres. They become more tricky down towards the resort.
Hi Ian and the Ski Podcast, thanks for having me once again. This is Jen from That's Le Plan, and I'm coming to you from the very snowy slopes of Le Plan. And I'm currently on the Boulevard chairlift, for those of you that know Le Plan, heading up to Plan Centre. And yep, you heard right, it is snowing here. So we are on day 3 of kind of slow but steady snow. We've had about 10 centimetres by this morning. Today is Wednesday, and it's still going strong. We expect maybe another 5 to maybe 10 centimetres of snow to land today, which is just fantastic. And it's really freshened everything up because it had been quite warm last week. So we'd had a lot of very warming up of the snow, getting quite slushy, very spring in feel, a couple of sunny après sessions. And then it had frozen overnight and made places quite treacherous, like car parks and the pavements and things like that were getting very, very icy. So the new snow is very much welcome. We are looking at very cold temperatures, very like -5 to -7 throughout the rest of this week, and then potentially warming up as we move into next week and March skiing. Can you believe it? It's been a very busy February for us here in Le Plan. We had quite a few big university groups here at the end of January and early February, and then as they disappeared it kind of opened up to the February half-term skiers. So we're just coming to the end of that kind of peak February time now, and the resort is starting to calm down from next week, and we really will start to move into spring skiing. So fingers crossed for some quieter slopes, for some long sunny lunches on the terrace, and some longer ski days with the sun. And that's pretty much it from me in Le Plan, so take care and I will see you on the slopes.
Don't forget, if you want to help the Ski Podcast and save yourself some money this winter, all you need to do is use code Ski Podcast when you book your ski hire at intersportrent.com. I would like to thank everybody who's done that already this winter. You've saved yourself some money and you've helped fund the podcast at the same time. So it's genuinely appreciated. If you do want to do the same, simply take the link in the show notes and your discount will automatically be applied. Now, we've got some GB race news. Freddy Carrick-Smith took gold in the giant slalom. Zak Carrick-Smith took bronze in the slalom. I reported on that in our last podcast, but there was success on the freestyle side of things as well. Sandra Caune won gold in the ski big air and bronze in the slopestyle, and Emily Rothney won gold in the snowboard big air. That is 5 podiums in total. It's extremely impressive. And to reiterate, these guys are all 16 or 17 years old. There is so much young GB talent out there. I mean, most listeners will know Mia Brooks. She's now a Crystal Globe winner in snowboard 2 years in a row. She's only 18. And I was really pleased to see this week Kirsty Muir was back in action. She is a kind of relative veteran. she's only 20, but compared to these guys, but she's on her way back from injury, and she took 6th in the slopestyle in Stoneham last week. So that is really good to see. Now, we have a great generation coming through, and regular listeners will know that the Ski Podcast is sponsoring Team Carrick-Smith. That is Freddie, Zak, and their older brother, Luca. And I'm pleased to say we have an update from them. So let's have a listen to that.
So, Freddie, in EOF this past month, obviously you won the giant slalom, which is amazing. How did you feel going to the second run? Was there any nerves, anything like that?
No, you know what? I felt really good. I felt good first run, solid position for the second run. Needed a good second run. So that's what I did. Did my best, and it was I was really happy with it. After coming down, I felt really pleased with the run.
And how did you feel knowing you had won it? Because obviously I was standing at the bottom. I didn't have a best of runs, but that's fine because I was super happy that you had won it. How did you feel? Because obviously you had to watch, I think, 1 or 2 athletes and to know that you had won it.
Yeah, it was a good feeling, you know, but it's all helped to my parents, my mum, dad, and also my brothers that have helped me get this far. It was definitely a good feeling. But I was also happy, well, for my brother Zak, who came 3rd in the slalom a few days later, which was insane after having a really good second one. How does that make you feel, Simon?
Yeah, that slalom was great. Obviously, I've been coming back from injury, so I feel like I could have done better in the entire event, but it was a super fun event. And yeah, I was super happy with the slalom.
Yeah, it was amazing to see you come 3rd place. Awesome. Well done, Zak.
Thank you, Freddie. And what do you think the atmosphere was like with Sandra and Emily and all the other athletes? Because I think it was a bunch of camaraderie, and it was a great team atmosphere. Some of the athletes would come up to watch our events, and we'd go watch theirs. Try to support as many people as we could. How do you think it was?
Yeah, I thought it was quite amazing. Of course, the 2 girls got gold in snowboarding. Emily and Sandra got gold and a 3rd place in freestyle, which was insane. And the atmosphere was awesome. Everyone was super kind and super nice. So I think it was definitely an amazing event, and I'd love to go back.
Yeah, same here. Super fun event. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and we'll speak to you soon.
Right, I mentioned at the top of the show, I've just been ski touring in Mt Etna, and this was an epic trip. It was quite honestly one of the best adventures I've ever had skiing, and I've been lucky enough to enjoy quite a few. I can't quite remember how the idea for doing this cropped up, but I'm interested in adventures, and this definitely was one. So firstly, let's tackle the travel. This was a big part of the whole trip. And regular listeners will know I've taken the flight-free UK challenge for a 2nd year, meaning I'm not taking any flights. So I travelled there by train. And the way I did this was I used an Interrail pass because it's a kind of 2-day in each direction journey. I bought it from Rail Europe. And I'm guessing most listeners are probably familiar with the idea of Interrail, but you can buy a certain number of days of travel that you use within a month, typically. So I bought a 5-day pass. And I've detailed all of this in a post on Ski Flight Free. But in broad strokes, on day 1, I travelled from London to Rome. I did a sightseeing run in Rome the following morning. And then the next day, I went via Naples to the southern tip of Italy, where I took this incredible and unique in Europe rail ferry, where the train gets shunted, the carriages on the train get shunted onto the ferry. And then the ferry crosses the Straits of Messina from Villa San Giovanni to Messina, and then comes off at the other end and actually splits and goes in 2 directions. One goes to Palermo and the other one goes to Syracuse. And I went along there to Taormina, which was close to Becs. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, so is it a really long ferry? Or do the carriages...
No, right. They split it up. It is not a really long ferry. So there's like 4 sets of rails on the ferry, and they split up the train and then gradually shunt it. So the actual transfer process takes quite a long time. It's probably half an hour to 40 minutes from arriving in Villa San Giovanni before the ferry sets off as they slot them all in. And you can either stay on the train if you want to. I stayed on the train when it got shunted on, and then went up to the deck and had a look. And it is quite amazing looking down onto what you might call the cargo bay and seeing all these carriages lined up.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and on the way back, I stopped in Florence. I had a full day there. I combined high culture and low culture. I went to see Michelangelo's David in the morning in the Accademia gallery there, and then went to a Serie A football match just up the road in Empoli in the evening. Took a train to Milan that evening, and then Milan back to the UK the next day.
Nice. And when you were coming down and you got to Rome in a day, how did you do that? Was that Paris, Milan, Rome?
Yeah, close enough. Yeah, had to be able to do that to get to Rome in a day, although you could get to Naples if you wanted to in a day. I took the first Eurostar of the day, which is 0601, to Paris, then Paris to Zurich, Zurich to Milan, Milan to Rome.
Right.
You could, at the moment, the reason I took that route is because at the moment, regular listeners will know from my conversations with Mark Smith when I interviewed him, the man in seat 61, that the actual train service going down the Maurienne Valley through to Turin, which would be a quicker route, is currently closed. That is going to open again at the end of March, which will make it a bit easier. And Mike, did you have a question?
And did that ferry come under the Interrail pass, or was that an additional cost?
No, that was included. On the way back, I wasn't on one of the connecting train I took to Messina wasn't one that went onto the train. So I had to get my own kind of passenger ferry, but it cost €2 to go across. So it wasn't like a big deal. It's a very kind of short crossing of about 20 minutes. So, it was tremendous fun traveling by train. I really enjoyed it. I got to see a couple of places that I have been to before, but literally, in the case of Florence, when I last interrailed in 1987, David hasn't changed and the city hasn't particularly changed. I've changed quite a bit. It's really good to do all of that. And the football match I went to was great fun as well. The ticket for that football game, which is a Serie A match, cost €9.50. I had a look on line. I thought, Empoli, they're not doing particularly well. They have a 16,000 seater stadium. They normally get 10,000. €9.50, and it was such fun. I was sitting on a stand, which felt like the family stand. There were lots of, kids, all ranges, mums, dads, young people. People were drinking because you can have beer in Italy. There's no problem with that, etc. It was just a great fun atmosphere. So I built a lot into it, and all of that isn't even the skiing.
We've just spent so much time talking about the travel, but it's.
I packed a lot in, but what happened was we did go for the skiing, and I say I met my brother over there. It was a trip that we've done together. Listeners might remember that previously last year, in fact this time last year, we skied in Scotland, guided by Blair Aitken on Ben Lawes, and we like these adventures like that. And we hired a guide. There are only 3 official mountain guides, UAIGM guides in Sicily. And Mirto Monaco, I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to book him. He was our guide. He took us up to a ski resort called Piano Provenzala, which is at about 1,800 meters. And we ski toured up to 3,200 meters. And that is on the north side. This is called Etna Nord. You go up towards the northeast crater. And, that was pretty hard work. You took about, relatively high altitude. So, when you're getting to the top, 3,200 meters. On top of that, you've got, at that point, because it was quite a windy day, this kind of volcanic fog coming across you, this smell of sulfur and taste of sulfur that was, you're working quite hard anyway because you're ski touring at above 3,000 meters and you're breathing this sulfurous fumes into your lungs as well. The climb up, was great. It was hard work. The guide Mirto took us. There's several craters up there. You might be aware that there was an eruption going on over the last couple of weeks. I realise now that eruptions are not uncommon on Etna. It happens fairly often. This one is unusual in that it reached much lower than more recent eruptions, perhaps the longest for 20 years. Got as far down as crossing a road, a path. But it was on the other side of the mountain. It was on Etna Sud. And, I'd seen a bunch of viral videos of people skiing next to the molten lava. And I thought, I'll be up for that. And to be honest with you, Mirto, our guide, was up for taking us. I read in the papers that skiing was banned, but that's evidently not the case. The problem was we just could not find a hire shop that would lend us skis to ski on the south side of Etna because there's so much ash around over there at the moment and volcanic debris that you would just ruin the skis. And, we tried 4 or 5 different hire shops and friends of his and we could have offered to pay a bit more if we damaged them or whatever, but it wasn't going to happen. So, Becs?
Yeah, I'm really surprised. This is a stupid question, probably, but is it not really warm as well, though, with this erupting lava? The volcano's active. I always thought volcanoes were warm, so the fact that even that there's snow on it is slightly blowing my mind. But then the fact that it's could you feel it?
Yeah, I mean, you have got a point there because so it's above 3,000 meters. I always knew there was an element of risk to do with snow. I mean, we went to Scotland last year, and there was very, very little snow. We're going very high this year, and I've been looking at those webcams for a long time, and it was promising. I mean, they've actually had a really good year. If we'd gone the year before, according to Mirto, we wouldn't have had much opportunity at all. But we skied all the way down to Piano Provenzala at 1,800 meters when we did the descent. So we had a 1,400 meter vertical drop. What is interesting about what you say there about the snow is that we skinned up to just below the main crater between the northeast and the southeast craters, and that snow was like spring snow. It was really soft because of the heat in that area. It was quite, it was nice and easy to ski down. It was spring skiing is like, and there was no debris around there. When we went back around to the north side, north evidently doesn't see the sun as often. We had every single type of snow going down there apart from powder. Really hard back. A lot of it was windswept, with ridges. Then he had some really nice patches of good snow. And then as we got lower down again, it became more like spring snow as well. And the other weird thing about snow from across most of the area, but certainly much more noticeable lower down, is that it's just grey. It's got this layer of ash upon it because there's been a recent eruption. Depends which way the wind has been blowing, but it's grey, dirty grey, and you have this strange thing where you can ski through it, and you leave these. You look back to see your tracks, and your tracks are white. You've carved these white tracks through it. Or occasionally, when Duncan and I were skiing on, we went back without the guide a couple of days later. We were looking for white bits of snow to ski on because they're just like better grip, etc. So it was quite weird in that respect. It's tremendous fun, Mike.
Which is not dissimilar when you see these events come in from the Sahara, for example, where they bring the sand that gets blown into the the European resorts, and then the resorts turn that sort of browny orangish color, which looks fantastic. Sometimes the sky is filled orange, but it's quite grippy, and you leave those white lines behind, but it's tough. It's tough to ski through that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't so difficult to ski through, but what you're talking about, that how it looks, is kind of similar to that. Just imagine if someone has sprinkled this ash, which is literally what's happened, all over the snow. Piano Provenzala is a ski resort. It goes from 1,800 to 2,300. And while we were there were plenty of people there. There were only 2 drag lifts open at the time. They got 4 lifts, 10 kilometers of piste. You can do piste skiing there. And there were people learning to ski. It was fantastic. And, some more experienced people, quite a few ski tourers. And we saw other ski tourers. I mean, day one, we went from 1,800. When Duncan and I went back on day 3, we took the lifts up to 2-3, so we only did a 900 vertical up to the top of the crater. Mike?
Yeah, and for most people who ski in, the Alps in Austria, Switzerland, France, and Italy, skiing on a volcano is a rare event. But if you ski in North America, the whole Cascades range, Mount Hood, Timberline, Mount Shasta, they're all dormant volcanoes. Lots of volcanoes in Japan. There's the Auvergne is the one area in France where that's a dormant volcano. So for other people in other parts of the world, it's not that such a rare event to learn on a volcano as such. And then in some places, like for example, Asahidake, the highest peak in Hokkaido, the volcano is active, so you're going through those fumaroles and the steam vents. Not so much lava, but certainly there's activity underneath you.
I mean, we often don't think of them, particularly if they're inactive. But it was exciting, watching the plumes of cloud, the mix of gas and water vapor coming out the top when we caught the sight of it the first time. We did, I mentioned that we would have been keen to ski around by the eruption. I don't know. Maybe that just would have been for the shot. But the guide did take us on day 2. We went over to Etna Nord, and they've got a gondola there. Basically, it used to be a ski resort over there as well. Both ski resorts were destroyed in 2002 by separate eruptions, i.e. the lifts were completely destroyed. On Etna Nord, they rebuilt it. On Etna Sud, they did rebuild it as well. But because it's on the south side, their snow is more affected. And several years ago, 2017 now, they took the decision to just focus on trekking. They don't do skiing over there, although you can evidently go up there and ski. And the guide told me that they often go up there and you can see some great lines coming down off the cable car if you wanted to. But we went up there and we walked up to the source of the current eruption. And it was amazing. That was really amazing. Actually seeing lava kind of face to face. It is so hypnotic watching these red lumps of glowing coal, magma, drifting past, and ridiculously hot. It is, 1,100, 1,200 degrees Celsius, which means in reality, if you're standing about, I'm going to say like 3-4 meters away, it's so hot that you can't look at it for more than a couple of seconds. And that was just amazing, really incredible experience. And really, I think we were lucky to kind of be there at that time. And actually, I also read in the paper, several people sent me messages saying, "Oh, be careful, and isn't it banned, and this and that." But we were with a guide. There weren't any other people there at the time when we were there. Apparently, at the base of that eruption, lots of people have been going there. But he told me it's a 5K walk to get there from the nearest car park. So if we wanted to ski, we would have had to have skate for 5K just to get to the bottom of it. I didn't see any people taking ridiculous selfies or all these sort of things that I read about, or cooking sausages or these things I read about. But I can only comment on what I saw. But overall, incredible experience. It was a good snow year. The volcano is unpredictable, so you can still ski there and you can still ski tour there, and if you like adventure, I'd highly recommend it. Mike, probably on your list, maybe?
It's always been on my list, all these kind of places, but as you found when you went to Morocco previously, you've got to be in the right place at the right time, otherwise there's very marginal conditions or possibly non-existent. So sometimes you have to move very, very quickly.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I went to Morocco with my brother as well. It's kind of the third of those great adventures that we've done. And the conditions there weren't very good, but it was still a tremendous experience, staying, in that case, in the refuge, 3,500 meters, I think it was, Tubkul. That place was, I'm not going to say the opposite of Etna, but it was so cold at night. I recently looked at a picture of myself wrapped up in blankets, trying to kind of edit a video on my laptop, and the laptop battery would only last for about 5 minutes because it was so cold in that refuge. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Right, that was my story about Etna. Let's look at another place that people don't often go in winter, and that is Catalonia. Sometimes on the podcast we talk about Maribel, Val d'Isère, Morzine, but we like to cover different ground. And Becs, I wanted to have you on the show as you've just done a very different type of trip there. You were glamping in Catalonia, is that right?
Yeah, that's 100% right. It was so it's a glamping site that I actually visited in the summer with my family. It's called Forest Days, and it's in the central region of Catalonia, so it's the El Solsonès region. It's the region in Catalonia that's the most strongest, fiercely independent, which kind of comes through in lots of the passion is very much there. It's great. And it's run by, it's a really small glamping site. They've only got 4 bell tents. And John and Montserrat, the couple that run it, they've been running it for 10 years. And when we were there over the summer, it was brilliant to meet them, great spot. And they said they're thinking about opening in the winter as well for the first time. So I was like, brilliant, because me, love the winter. And the campsite's in the sort of the foothills of the Pre-Pyrenees. So it's about 15-20 minutes outside the town of Solsona, which is a really lovely medieval walled town. It's actually technically a city, but it's tiny. So the glamping site's at about 600 meters, and then nearby, about 40 minutes drive away or so, are a couple of ski resorts. And also you could go further, you could travel further afield to, I think in total there's about 10 ski resorts in Catalonia. The biggest one is Becs, but it's not that close to Becs. And so the idea came about then of a slow winter holiday. You know, skiing was part of it, but it wasn't the main be all and end all. It was actually having this winter experience in the campsite, getting back to nature, taking a slower pace. So, and on that slower pace front, I also took the train. It was absolutely wonderful. So I had breakfast in London. I had 3 hours to get across Paris. So I took slow travel to the nth degree and walked from Gare du Nord to Gare de Lyon. It was a lovely sunny Saturday morning in Paris. Everyone was like strolling down the canal. Had lunch in Paris and then got on the TGV to Barcelona and had dinner in Barcelona. And so I spent the night in Barcelona, joined a friend. The following morning, we hired an electric vehicle and drove from Barcelona an hour and a half up into the mountains and arrived at Forest Days glamping sites. And it was just heaven.
That's great. I actually didn't even know that you'd gone there by train. Maybe I should have realised that. But I like that. I've done that walk between Gare de Lyon and Gare du Nord myself before. I had to do it one time because now that I think about it, I was coming back from Switzerland just as COVID was coming in. And I got to Paris and everyone was trying to leave Paris to get to their country homes or whatever it was. And the underground was just overwhelmed. So I had to walk between Gare de Lyon to Gare du Nord. It's quite a nice walk, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was glorious.
And then you had dinner in Barcelona as well. I really like that. I love that way of, like building more into the trip itself. And you mentioned Becs, which most people have heard of, but the resorts that you were around, we're talking about these smaller places, maybe more like, Etna Nord, where they got, 10K of what were the resorts that you went to, the ski resorts?
So the biggest one that we went to was a place called Port del Comte. They say it's got 50, I think it's got between 40 and 50 kilometres of slopes, and it reaches an altitude of 2,100 metres. It's the closest one to Barcelona as well. And it was really lovely. Lots of the tree line's very high there. It's one of those places that you'd be like, I'll go to for the weekend. I'll see what the conditions are like. When we were there, it was really lovely. And we did some ski touring up into the sort of more remote part of it. But there was also lots of families learning there. You can stay there if you wish as well, but most people sort of day trip in and out. And so it felt a bit like a Scandinavian resort. It had that sort of feel to it.
Right. Okay. And then you also went cross-country skiing in another resort.
Yes, we did. We went to Tucson as well, which is also about 40 minutes away from Forest Days. And there's snowshoe hikes there. There's cross-country skiing there. Again, all through the forest, just really, really nice slow pace. Just felt very relaxing. I hate the word authentic. It's totally overused. But it was just that. It was very rough and ready and it was really natural.
Cool. Okay. And it wasn't just skiing because, you talked about Forest Days. There was a lot more to it than that in terms of other activities that you could do.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I had my most unusual après ski session after skiing at Port del Comte. And then we went truffle hunting down near Solsana. So met up with a wonderful truffle specialist in the area called Juan. And his dog Una took us into this into the forest where they cultivate the truffles, and then there's and then he's got a little stone hut that he's built near the farm that owns the land. And you can have your truffles there afterwards. So it's gorgeous.
I also saw on your list of activities you went looking for fire kindling as part of
yeah, so this is properly back to nature. This is fantastic. This is so the campsite is in this valley called the Aura Valley, and at the end of it, about 20 minutes drive away, are these big cliffs, these Busa cliffs, and huge limestone cliffs. And so walking along the top of those at sunset, you've got discarded branches from the pine trees. And what you're looking for is the inner core of that branch, or from a particular pine tree. They call it Tea in Catalonian, and we're struggling to find a sort of English translation of it. So we had an axe and we had a basket with us, and so you chip away to get to that inner core, and you only need a sort of thumb-sized piece. And it ignites so brilliantly. Compare it to a normal piece of wood. It's nature's firelighted. It's fabulous. So we sort of scavenged for a few of those and took them back to the campfire, and we're sitting around roasting, cooking, and roasting marshmallows and things like that.
So who do you think this who would you recommend this type of trip to then?
Not for families. It's not. While the campsite in the summer is fantastic for families, and Port del Comte as a resort would be great if you were learning to ski, the combination of glamping, getting around, it's not a ski in, ski out holiday at all. And one day you might go skiing, one day you might go and do something else completely different, depending on the weather, depending on your mood. So it really it would suit a couple of friends, it would suit a couple, just people that are a bit more interested, a bit more adventurous, and looking for sort of a more general winter experience in the mountains.
Come on, and a more authentic one. You mentioned you travel by EV. Regular people know I recently drove out to Courmayeur and Chamonix in an electric car. How did you find that experience?
So it's the first time actually that I've driven an electric vehicle, and the company that we hired it from is called Mech Car Sharing. They're quite new, and they've got loads of videos on their website, which was really useful, because there is a bit of a steep learning curve with all the different charging leads and cables and networks that you might need. And I ended up having so many apps on my phone to this one. But Mech's great because they provide you with prepaid charge cards for everywhere that you need. So there was only one charging point that we had to pay for. So that was really good. It's slightly daunting driving up into the mountains because your battery's going and there's a charging point that you're aiming for. What we quickly learned was that actually then when you're driving down the mountains, you're barely using any battery at all. And in fact, you might even be sort of reboosting the battery. I'm sure there's a more technical term than that, but
regenerating.
So it kind of balances out. So it was really, and across Catalonia, there are loads and loads and loads of charge points. And, the apps were very accurate as to which ones were working, which ones had space, which ones, just with a little bit of planning, knowing that, great, there's a place we can get a coffee there, charge the car up for a bit and then carry on.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, I mean, that is, I'm quite an experienced EV driver as it goes. I mean, I've had one for 5 years now, but even then, on my most recent trip, you still need to do a bit of planning. You need to think ahead. It's not quite as straightforward as it is driving a diesel or petrol car at the moment, but it is improving the whole time. Mike?
And what kind of temperatures were there down in the campground there?
That's a good point. Yeah, in the campground. So overnight, one night it got down to about 5 or 6 degrees. So in the tent they've got wood burning stoves and plenty of firewood, and plus your teia kindling to get it going. And then the bed is so comfy and cozy. We weren't cold. One night it was a little bit chilly. That's because I hadn't stoked the fire enough and it went out. But no, and then up.
But more things that you learn as you go along. Well, that's great, Becs. Thanks for telling us about that and giving some insight into Catalonia, another different sort of trip. And depending how you want to look at it, the reason I asked Mike to join us today is that you've just been out to Bulgaria, and I thought it would be interesting to find out a little bit about that. Probably a different trip for some people. I mean, it's quite popular with UK skiers, but you were in Borovets, is that right?
Yes, I was. I mean, what I tend to do, I tend to work away for the winters. And then when I come back to Europe, this year I'm in Europe the whole time, but when I come back to the main European countries, my partner and I, she takes the time off work. She books her time in advance. And then I'm checking the weather to see where the good snow is going to fall, who's had good conditions, and try to put that whole cost-effective package along with good snow together. We were able to take an earlier trip. Normally we go in March, but we took an earlier trip this year, went from the 11th to 18th of January. And at that time, Borovets in Bulgaria was the only resort really, outside of Bansko as well. Those were the choices for us, that were really going to experience any new snow in that time period, or any significant new snow in that time period that we were looking at. And it came through. I mean, I use Snow Forecast a lot, and we had 40 to 50 centimeters of new snow in that week.
Yeah, I mean, you're very good at tracking exactly what's going on and having that flexibility in your life to pick up the deals. I don't know if it's your catchphrase or not, but if it's snowing, I'm going is your mantra, let's say, and you just like track what's going on and then you look for it, and you got quite a good deal on this particular trip, right?
Fantastic. I mean, it's an established resort primarily for families, and then groups of people older that are looking to learn to ski possibly, but also having a bit of a party atmosphere as well. So Borovets and Bansko, Pamparova, those Bulgarian resorts really were at the forefront of that. I hadn't been. I'd met Bulgarian people whilst I'd been skiing. When I skied in North Macedonia, I skied with a couple of Bulgarians there. And they'd always said that there was good skiing beyond what they'd kind of advertised in the brochures from this beginner sort of stuff. And I wanted to see it myself.
And what was your conclusion then?
My conclusion is, and I was very fortunate to work in Keystone, Colorado for one winter. And that really rammed home the idea that a family resort doesn't necessarily mean you don't have very different and a variety of good terrain within it. It's just pitched primarily at that market. So when we got there, we could see, I'd seen it from the map and I'd spoken with a lot of people, been on a number of forums. You don't get racers coming from Borovets if they don't have any race terrain. It's primarily stacked towards the beginner and the intermediate, but there's plenty of steep piste skiing and there's some fantastic off-piste as well.
And you were able to combine that with fresh snow at the time as well, right?
Absolutely, and that's what I'm kind of looking for, is that hopefully it has the terrain. The other thing as well, spending a lot of my time in Japan, the resorts are not big, so you're having to do laps. So when you look at some places, it's only got just over 50 kilometers worth of pisted terrain, but all the stuff in between builds that acreage up. And I don't mind lapping stuff as long as the snow conditions are good.
Do you just want to let listeners know how you would get to Borovets? Do you fly into Sofia? Is that how that works?
Yeah, we came into Sofia. We went on a package, so we didn't have to really think. All we did was we booked the time ahead, the time frame ahead of time, but we booked the holiday towards the end, maybe 3 or 4 days before, once we knew everything was in place. Went up to London, went up to Gatwick, flew from Gatwick with Crystal. The shuttles were waiting for us at Sofia Airport, and then it was only an hour's and a half's drive from the airport then to the accommodation. We were in the Hotel Lion, which was a lovely family resort, which was also used a lot by Bulgarians coming up from Sofia. So it wasn't just a Crystal hotel, so you got to see and meet other people from the area as well, which was fantastic. Great food. And there was a shuttle bus service that took you regularly in the mornings and brought you back about a 15-minute ride from the resort itself.
So, and what kind of altitude are we talking about? Resort level and top.
So compared with some places, in the Alps, not very high. It went from 1,315 meters at the base to just over 2,500 meters at the summit, the highest lift, which is decent. It's comparable to lots of places in Austria and Italy. But that part of the world, it's about location rather than altitude. They get a lot more snow typically in that Balkans region relative to the height of the resorts.
1,300, 2,500. I mean, that's comparable with like the Port del, for example. You mentioned Italy and Austria as well. And you said there was about 50 kilometers of kind of marked pistes. If you weren't a backcountry type of person, would you say it's most suitable for beginners, intermediates, or do they have black runs on there as well?
There's two kind of areas. When you look at the map, the left-hand side of the map, as you look at the piste map, is very much centered around almost ski-in, ski-out hotel type setup, where there's the majority of the beginner terrain, beginner ski schools, and then the intermediate terrain. But from that smaller base as such, and the smaller vertical height, plenty of good tree skiing and good stuff that you can just pop off, because a lot of resorts these days are realizing that people don't want to just have pisted terrain, and economically it makes sense for them as well. So you'll see a lot of runs which will be half pisted, for example, where they'll groom half of the run, leave the other half open. So there's a real nice transition then from groomed terrain to ungroomed terrain. And then as it gets busier, so that's normally what happens in the midweek. And then when it gets closer then towards the weekend, where lots of people are coming up from Sofia, then they'll groom the full width of the run, so because they know they're going to have lots more people skiing on there. They don't want to get too crowded.
So they were just saving half of the piece for you, were they, Mike?
Not just me. I mean, it's one of those things where having doing it as a profession, too often you hear this where you've got to be a great black run pisted skier to be able to even think about going off piste. But the reality is, if you've got the right snow conditions, if you're a green run skier, you can go onto the green sloped with a little bit of soft snow on top. So we try to find lots more of these kinds of areas where you can transition very easily from pisted terrain to non-pisted terrain without feeling like you're going in the middle of nowhere.
Excellent. And what about, I think you mentioned maybe you ate in the hotel, so it was like half full, but were you eating out on the mountain, or did you go out into resort? What kind of size is Borovets, and what are the options there?
It's kind of one main street that sort of wraps itself around the base of the village area on the left-hand side of the map as you look up. Lots of restaurants, lots of bars, tribute acts in the evening. And they're looking to get people having a good experience, a lot of drinking, a lot of special drinks early après. So there's a good scene there, but you don't have to have that if you don't want to. We found ourselves in a place called the Sun Ski Pub, which was owned by a third-generation family. We didn't know it at the time. We just went in there and started talking, and they spoke English, which was fantastic. The son runs it now. The father had run it before him, and the grandfather had started it when Borovets started as a resort. So Dimitar is the son. He's a ski instructor. The dad is running the ski rental place next door. Mum and dad and son working between them to run a little bit of a cafe. So it kind of covered all bases, and it was just opposite where our bus shuttle would drop us off in the morning and pick us up in the evening. So we'd come back from skiing, have a couple of hours in there, just having a couple of glasses of wine and maybe a nibble of something and a chat, and go from there. But there's plenty of good eating on mountain, and very reasonable prices. You're looking a lot cheaper than the main areas in Europe. Prices have gone up. Speaking with Dimitar, he said since COVID, prices have gone up. I think that's pretty much a general trend everywhere, is trying to recoup money that they may have lost during the time when tourists weren't able to come to the country. But you're still looking at, a glass of beer or wine would be under £4, coffee £2 to £3, and a good meal that would fill you up, solid mountain food would be under a tenner. So very, very good value.
Well, that's brilliant, Mike, and excellent to have another update from you on another part of the world that you've been to. Probably we'll be asking you about your next adventures down the track, because if it's snowing, you're going. You're always going to be going to a different place. Now, I love hearing from listeners, and we have quite a few bits of feedback to cover this week. And I'm going to reveal the winner of the Valon Goggles competition, so keep listening. Now, Matt Sylvester, he got in contact to say, I just wanted to say hello from Pleasant Mountain in Maine, USA. I am obsessed with skiing kit and technique. I enjoyed episode 235 with Stuart Winchester from the Storm Skiing podcast. He also suggests we consider the great ski mountains of Maine, New Hampshire. So another one to add to the list. Chris Howie also enjoyed episode 235. Love the ski podcast today, as always. Super to hear more about the epic and icon passes and how the UK model for skiing is completely different from Europe. Jane Gotts sent us a message saying, enjoy listening to podcasts. Someone, Anon on Spotify, loving the ski podcast in the car from a wet and windy Dublin. Another anonymous comment from someone who kindly bought me a coffee. A great podcast, Iain. I've enjoyed it for ages and attended your talks at the snow show. Skiing has generally poor coverage on TV, so podcasts like yours help keep ski enthusiasts like me stoked between ski trips and seasons. Keep it up. So I appreciate that from whoever you are. Now, thanks so much for all of those, but now is the time to reveal the winner of our Valon Goggles competition. So congratulations to Dominic Hales. I hope you're listening, Dominic, who left this message on Spotify. Love listening to episode 237 about the Dolomites. We got our photos from a trip to Val Gardena, and surely can't be a more photogenic place. Well, I hope it is, because I will be going to Val Gardena next month, which I'm very excited about. So if you could email me your address, Dominic, to theskipodcast@gmail.com, I will get your prize sent out to you. And listener, if you didn't win this time, the good news is we're going to have another competition soon. So if you want to send us your feedback, I do enjoy listening to it. Let me know your thoughts on the show. Contact me on social at the Ski Podcast or by email theskipodcast@gmail.com. Now, there are now 251 episodes of the Ski Podcast. 185 of those were listened to in the last week. Interestingly, I noticed that includes our Olympic special episodes from Pyeongchang 2018. So whoever that was listening to those, I admire your commitment. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this episode, I can pretty much guarantee you'll find more that you'll like in our back catalogue. So why not go to theskipodcast.com and take a look around to find your next podcast to listen to. And if this is your first time of listening, you might be interested to know that the Ski Podcast is listened to across the world. Just over half of our listeners are in the UK. Next most are in the USA. But in the last week, they were spread as far and wide as Kenya, Cambodia, and Uruguay. If you like the Ski Podcast, there are 3 things you can do to help. Follow us, look for the button, press it now, give us a review or leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and you can book your ski hire with InSport Rent using the code SKIPodcast or take the link in the show notes. And you can follow me at Skipedia, the podcast at Ski Podcast. You can also follow us on WhatsApp for exclusive material released ahead of the podcast. Look in the show notes for that link. I'd like to thank my guest today, Becs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. It's been great.
And Mike, thank you.
Always a pleasure. Anytime.
And finally, listener, thank you for joining us wherever in the world you're listening right now. And until next time, goodbye.